Welcome to the Royal Griot. We are so grateful for your incredible support as we bring you stories of love, resilience, and the power of the African spirit. Before we continue with today's emotional journey, please take a moment to tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love hearing from our family in the US, Jamaica, and across the globe. I am Adebowale Adenuga. In the boardroom they call me the Iron Lion. I built an empire from the red dust of Lagos into a multi-billion naira conglomerate. I have private jets, a fleet of limousines, and a fortune that could feed generations. But inside the walls of my home I was a man defeated. My daughter, Tiwa, was born into a world of absolute silence. She was born deaf, and despite flying in the best doctors from London and New York, she remained locked in a world I couldn't reach. My wife passed away giving birth to her, leaving me a cold-hearted widower whose only mission was to protect Tiwa from a world that would surely try to break her. "Sir, please, I was only trying to help," Simi, the new maid, stammered. She was a small woman, dressed in a faded but neat local print. She looked like a struggling single mom, the kind of person who usually faded into the background of my busy life. "Help? You're a maid, Simi? Your job is to scrub floors and dust trophies, not to perform whatever local experiments you were doing on my daughter." I snapped. My fiancée, Fola, stepped out of the shadows, her gold jewelry clinking. Fola was a high society woman, beautiful and sharp, but she had no patience for Tiwa's condition. "Debo, darling, I told you hiring someone from the mainland was a mistake," Fola said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "They bring their superstitions into this modern house. Look at poor Tiwa, she looks terrified." Tiwa wasn't terrified though. She was staring at Simi with an intensity one had never seen. Usually, my daughter was a ghost in this mansion, drifting from room to room with a vacant expression. But now her eyes were wide, fixed on Simi's pocket. "Get out," I whispered, my voice low and dangerous. "Pack your things. I'll have the driver take you back to the slums." Simi didn't move. She didn't cry. Instead, she looked me straight in the eyes, a boldness few dared. "Mr. Adenuga, you have all the money in the world, but you are the one who is truly deaf. You don't hear your daughter's heart because you're too busy listening to the sound of your own coins." The room went silent. The security guards shifted uncomfortably. I felt a vain throb in my temple. "You dare speak to me like that? In my own home?" "I dare because Tiwa deserves better," Simi said firmly. "I am a single mom. I lost my son to a fever because I couldn't afford the medicine you probably spend on a single bottle of champagne. I know what it means to fight for a child. You aren't fighting for her, sir. You're just hiding her." "That's enough," Fola screamed. "Security, throw this woman out." As the guards moved forward, Simi reached into her apron pocket. "I didn't touch her to hurt her, Mr. Adenuga. I touched her because I saw the mark on her neck. The same mark my grandmother described in the old stories. She isn't broken. She's waiting." She pulled out something wrapped in a piece of old hand-woven osso oak fabric. It was a small, strangely shaped wooden whistle, carved with ancient Yoruba symbols. It looked weathered as if it had been passed down through centuries. "What is that rubbish?" Fola scoffed. "A dirty piece of wood?" Simi ignored her. She knelt down so she was at eye level with Tiwa. I should have stopped her. I should have ended this madness right then. But something about the way the light hit that whistle, the way it seemed to hum in the heavy air of the mansion, made my feet feel like lead. Simi didn't blow the whistle. She didn't make a sound. She simply held it out in the palm of her hand. Tiwa, who usually shied away from everyone except me, did something that broke my heart into a million pieces. She stepped forward. She reached out her small, trembling hand and touched the wood. Then, Tiwa did something she had never done in 6 years. She opened her mouth and let out a soft, melodic hum. It wasn't the harsh, guttural sound the doctors said she might eventually make. It was a perfect note. I gasped, my knees nearly giving way. "Tiwa." Simi looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mysterious light. "The doctors told you she was deaf, Mr. Adenuga, but they didn't tell you what she can hear. This isn't a whistle for the ears. It's for the spirit." Suddenly, the heavy crystal chandelier above us began to vibrate. The glass hummed in perfect harmony with my daughter's voice. Fola backed away, her face pale with fear, but I stood frozen. "Who are you?" I whispered, looking at the struggling maid as if seeing her for the first time. "And what did you just do to my daughter?" Simi stood up, holding the whistle close to her chest. "I am just a mother who knows a secret you've forgotten, sir. But if you want to know the rest, you have to promise me one thing." "Anything," I said, the word escaping my lips before I could think. You have to fire your fiancée and let me take Tiwa to the market in Oyingbo tomorrow. Alone. My heart hammered against my ribs. Oyingbo? The crowded, chaotic heart of Lagos? It was a dangerous request for a billionaire's daughter who couldn't hear a car horn or a warning shout. But as I looked at Tiwa, who was now smiling, actually smiling, at this mysterious stranger, I knew my life was about to change forever. I can't do that, I said, even as I saw Fola's eyes fill with rage. Then you will never hear her speak her first word, Simi replied. The silence that followed Simi's demand was heavier than any boardroom tension I had ever faced. Fola's face transformed from a mask of high society elegance into a snarl of pure venom. Have you lost your mind, Debo? Fola shrieked, her voice cracking like a whip. You're actually listening to this beggar? She wants to take your daughter, a billionaire's heir, to Oyingbo Market? It's a den of thieves and filth. She'll probably kidnap her or sell her to the highest bidder. I looked at Fola. For months, I had convinced myself that she was the right woman to help me run my empire and provide a mother figure for Tiwa. But looking at her now, her face twisted in disgust at the mention of a local market, I saw only a stranger. A stranger who had never once tried to learn sign language, never once tried to sit on the floor and play with Tiwa, and never once looked at my daughter with anything but pity. Then I looked at Simi. She was still holding the wooden whistle, her gaze steady. She didn't look like a kidnapper. She looked like a woman who held a key I had been searching for across 3 continents. Fola, leave, I said, my voice cold and final. What? Debo, don't be ridiculous. I said leave. I roared, the sound bouncing off the high ceilings. The engagement is over. Security will escort you to your car. Your things will be sent to your father's house by evening. Fola gasped, her hand flying to her throat. You're choosing a maid over me? A woman who can't even afford a decent pair of shoes. I'm choosing my daughter, I replied. As the guards led a screaming, cursing Fola out of the mansion, the house felt suddenly lighter. I turned to Simi. I've done what you asked. But I'm warning you, if a single hair on Tiwa's head is harmed, there is no corner of this earth where you can hide from me. Simi didn't flinch. I am not afraid of your power, Mr. Adenuga. I'm only afraid of your fear. Get the girl ready. We leave at dawn. The next morning, the Lagos sun was just beginning to burn through the Atlantic mist. I didn't send a limousine. I didn't send a private security detail. Simi had insisted we take a regular taxi. A yellow and black Danfo was out of the question for Tiwa's safety, but she settled for a nondescript Uber. I sat in the front seat, my heart in my throat, while Simi and Tiwa sat in the back. Tiwa was wearing a simple cotton dress, her hair braided neatly. She looked like any other child, but to me she was a fragile glass doll in a world of hammers. As we drove toward the mainland, the scenery changed. The polished glass towers and quiet leafy streets of Lekki gave way to the vibrant, chaotic energy of Yaba, and then, finally, the sprawling madness of Oyingbo. The smell hit us first, a mixture of dried fish, fresh peppers, diesel exhaust, and the salty breeze from the lagoon. The noise was a physical wall. Hawkers screaming their prices, Agbaros shouting at bus drivers, the rhythmic pounding of yams and the constant blare of horns. Why here? I shouted over the din as we stepped out of the car. I felt out of place in my designer polo and expensive watch. I felt like a target. Simi didn't answer. She took Tiwa's hand. Usually, Tiwa would have been overwhelmed by such a sensory overload. She would have hidden her face in my leg and cried. But today she was walking with her head held high, her eyes darting everywhere with a strange curiosity. We wove through the narrow aisles of the market. Simi stopped at a stall where an old woman was selling hand-woven fabrics. The woman looked ancient, her skin like wrinkled parchment, but her eyes were sharp as needles. Mama, Simi said, bowing slightly. The old woman looked at Tiwa, then at me. She chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. The lion has come to the forest to find his cub's voice. She reached under her table and pulled out a small clay pot filled with a dark, aromatic oil. She beckoned Tiwa forward. I moved to intercede, but Simi placed a hand on my arm. Trust her, she whispered. The old woman dipped her thumb into the oil and traced a symbol on Tiwa's forehead, then behind each of her ears. She began to chant, a low, melodic Yoruba prayer that seemed to cut through the noise of the market. People began to stop and watch. A crowd of market women, their head ties bright and towering, gathered around. They weren't looking at me as the billionaire, they were looking at a father in need. She has the rhythm of the ancestors in her, the old woman said, looking at me. But the rhythm is blocked by the wall of silence you built around her, father. You gave her gold, but you didn't give her the earth. Suddenly Simi took out the wooden whistle. She didn't give it to Tiwa this time. She gave it to a young boy standing nearby, a beggar child with tattered clothes and a wide smile. "Play," Simi commanded. The boy blew into the whistle. It didn't make a loud sound, just a low, vibrating hum, much like the one Tiwa had made in the mansion. And then the miracle happened. From the other side of the market, a group of traditional drummers, men with talking drums slung over their shoulders, began to play. They weren't playing for money. They were responding to the whistle. Gong gong. Gong gong. Gong gong. The beat was infectious. It pulsed through the ground. I could feel it in the soles of my shoes. Tiwa stood perfectly still. Her eyes went wide. She began to sway. She wasn't hearing the sound with her ears. I realized then that the vibration of the drums in the open air, the collective energy of the people, and the specific frequency of that whistle were doing something no doctor's office could replicate. Tiwa started to dance. It wasn't the clumsy dance of a child, it was rhythmic, soulful. She was mimicking the beat of the talking drums. "She feels it." I cried out, tears stinging my eyes. "She feels the music." Simi leaned close to my ear. "In Africa we don't just speak with our mouths, Mr. Adenuga. We speak with our feet, our hands and our spirits. Your daughter isn't deaf to the world, she's just deaf to the noise you've trapped her in." The crowd began to clap in time with the drums. The market women started to sing a song of blessing. For the first time in my life I didn't feel like a billionaire. I felt like a part of something much bigger. I felt like a man who was finally coming home. But as the celebration reached its peak, a group of men in dark suits pushed through the crowd. They weren't market people. They were cold, professional, and they looked like the private security Fola's family employed. "Mr. Adenuga," the lead man said, stepping between me and my daughter. "Ms. Fola has filed an emergency petition for custody, claiming you are mentally unstable and endangering the child in a slum. We have a court order to take the girl." My blood ran cold. Fola had gone to her father, a high-ranking judge. This was a setup. "You aren't taking her anywhere," I growled, stepping in front of Tiwa. The man reached for his jacket, where I saw the glint of a holster. "Don't make this difficult, sir. We have the law on our side." Simi stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a hidden power. "You may have the law, but you don't have the people." With a single look from Simi, the market women closed in. They didn't use weapons. They simply stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of mothers and grandmothers, blocking the path of the men in suits. The drummers increased their pace, the rhythm turning from a blessing into a war cry. The lead man looked around, realizing he was outnumbered by hundreds of angry citizens. He looked at me, then at Simi. "This isn't over, Adenuga. You can't stay in the market forever." They retreated, but I knew he was right. I had won the battle, but Fola had started a war for my fortune and my daughter. I looked at Tiwa. She had stopped dancing. She was looking at me, her eyes filled with a new intelligence. She reached out and grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. "We need to leave," I said to Simi. "They'll be back with the police." "We aren't going back to the mansion," Simi said, her voice firm. "If you want to save Tiwa, you have to go where their laws can't reach you. You have to go to my village." "Your village?" I asked, bewildered. "But what about my empire? My business?" "Your empire is a cage," Simi replied. "Do you want a fortune, or do you want to hear your daughter call your name?" I looked at the chaos of Oyingbo, then at the daughter who had just discovered the rhythm of her soul. The choice was easy yet terrifying. "Take us there," I said. As we hurried toward the lagoon to find a boat, I didn't notice the mysterious stranger watching us from the shadows of a spice stall, a man with the same carving on his walking stick as the one on the wooden whistle. The stench of diesel fumes and brackish water replaced the expensive leather smell of my usual chauffeur-driven existence. I sat hunched in the middle of a long, narrow wooden canoe, my knees pulled up to my chest to avoid the bilge water sloshing at the bottom. My Italian loafers, worth more than this entire boat, were ruined. We had left the chaotic energy of Lagos behind hours ago, navigating a maze of creeks and lagoons that wound deeper into the mangroves. The towering skyscrapers of the island had long since vanished, replaced by dense walls of twisted roots and thick canopy that blocked out the late afternoon sun. I looked at Tiwa. She sat between Simi's legs near the bow, wrapped in a shawl. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she had one hand pressed flat against the bottom of the boat, her eyes closed in deep concentration. She was feeling the vibration of the outboard engine humming through the wood, feeling the slap of the water against the hull. It was a connection to the physical world that my climate-controlled mansion had never provided. I pulled out my gold iPhone. No signal. My empire, my contacts, my lawyers, they were all unreachable. For the first time in 20 years, Adebowale Adenuga was completely and utterly powerless. "Where are you taking us, Simi?" I demanded, trying to inject the authority of the Iron Lion into my voice, but it sounded thin and brittle over the drone of the engine. "We've been on this water for 3 hours. If this is a kidnapping scheme, tell me the ransom now." Simi didn't turn around. Her posture was straight, her gaze fixed on the winding waterway ahead. "You think everything is about money, sir? That is why your soul is starving." "Don't lecture me, woman," I snapped, my nerves fraying. "I am a billionaire. I have responsibilities. I have a board of directors waiting for me. Fola is probably turning Lagos upside down right now with the police." "Let her look," Simi said calmly. "Where we are going, her police cannot find us. And your money cannot buy passage." "And where is that exactly?" "A place where people still remember how to listen," she said enigmatically. The sun began to dip below the mangrove line, painting the water in shades of blood orange and deep purple. The beauty was terrifying. It felt ancient, indifferent to my wealth. Suddenly the engine sputtered. The boatman, a silent, wrinkled old man who hadn't spoken a word since Oyingbo, grunted and yanked the starter cord. It sputtered again, choked and died. Silence fell over the creek, heavy and sudden. The only sounds were the chirping of unseen insects and the eerie call of a distant bird. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. What happened? Why did we stop? "The engine is tired," the boatman muttered in Yoruba, his first words. "Fix it. I'll pay you double, triple." I yelled, the silence making me frantic. Simi turned to me then. In the fading light, her face looked different, stronger, almost regal. "Stop shouting, Mr. Adenuga. You are scaring the spirits of the water. Money won't make the engine start." I looked at Tiwa. She had opened her eyes when the engine stopped. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Not of the place, but of me. Of my anger. My loudness. I slumped back against the wet wood, defeated. "What do we do?" I whispered. Simi moved from the bow and sat across from me. She reached out and took Tiwa's hands, rubbing them gently. "We wait," she said. "And while we wait, you listen. Really listen." She looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away. "You asked me why I helped you. You asked who I am. Tell me," I said, my voice hoarse. 10 years ago, I was not a maid," Simi began quietly. "I was a young wife, happy, living in a small town outside Badagry. My husband was a fisherman. We had a son, Tayo. He was 3 years old when the sickness took him. It was a simple fever, sir. A fever that a few thousand naira of medicine could have cured." She paused, her eyes glistening in the twilight, but no tears fell. "I ran to the local clinic. They demanded payment up front. I didn't have it. My husband was out at sea. I begged them. I offered to scrub their floors for a year. They closed the door in my face. I held my son in my arms as the fire in his body went out. I was abandoned by the world because I was poor. A heavy stone settled in my gut. I remembered the times I had ruthlessly cut funding for corporate social responsibility projects because they didn't improve the bottom line. After Tayo died, my husband couldn't look at me. The grief ate him alive. He went out to sea one night during a storm and never came back. I had nothing. I was broken. I came to Lagos to disappear. I didn't know," I mumbled, feeling small. "Of course you didn't," she said, not unkindly. "Rich men don't see the people who clean their messes. But I saw you. I saw you on the TV, the Iron Lion. And then I got the job in your house. I saw Tiwa. And I saw the same look in her eyes that I had in mine. The look of someone trapped in a silent room." "But the whistle?" I questioned. "How did you know it would work?" She touched the pouch around her neck where she kept the whistle. "I didn't know. I hoped. This whistle, it was a gift. From a stranger I met years ago when I was at my lowest, begging near the bus park at Oshodi. An old man. He told me that one day I would need to unlock a door that had no key. He said sound is not just for the ears, it is the bridge between souls. A mysterious stranger. It sounded like a fairy tale, yet I had seen the effects with my own eyes in the market. Why me? Why my daughter? Because Adebowale, she used my first name, stripping away the titles. Healing is a two-way street. You think you are saving Tiwa, but perhaps she is the one meant to save you from the cold, lonely tower you built for yourself." As she spoke, Tiwa reached out and touched my face. Her small fingers traced the worry lines on my forehead. It was a tentative, gentle gesture. My heart, encased in ice since my wife died, cracked a little. I covered her small hand with my large one. "I'm sorry, Tiwa," I whispered, tears finally pricking my eyes. "I'm so sorry I didn't know how to be your father." Just then the boatman pulled the cord again. The engine roared to life, shattering the emotional moment, but the connection remained. Tiwa didn't pull her hand away. We continued in darkness, guided only by the boatman's flashlight. Another hour passed before I saw flickering lights ahead. We rounded a bend and there it was, a village built partly on stilts over the water and partly on a raised island of dry land. It wasn't a slum. The huts were neatly constructed from bamboo and thatch, glowing with the warm orange light of lanterns and cooking fires. The smell of roasting fish and wood smoke drifted toward us. It felt hidden, secret, a place time had forgotten. The boatman cut the engine and we drifted toward a wooden dock. As we approached, I saw figures standing there, waiting. They weren't smiling, welcoming committees. They were men holding long staffs, their faces stern in the lantern light. "They know we are here," I whispered nervously. "They always know," Simi said. She helped Tiwa up. "Stay close to me, sir. And whatever happens, do not disrespect them with your money talk. Here your bank account means nothing. Only your character matters." We stepped onto the creaking dock. The humidity was intense, pressing down on us. A tall man in the center of the group, dressed in white robes with intricate beadwork around his neck, stepped forward. He had eyes that seemed to see right through my designer clothes to the frightened man underneath. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Simi. "You returned?" the man said, his voice deep like a rolling drumbeat. It wasn't a greeting, it was an accusation. Simi bowed her head low, a gesture of deep submission I had never seen from her. "Baba Agba, I have returned." "And you brought an outsider," the elder continued, his gaze finally shifting to me. It was cold, appraising. "A man whose spirit is covered in soot. You know the law, Simisola. You broke your vows when you left this place 10 years ago to chase the city life. Why bring this trouble back to our doorstep?" "Simisola?" It wasn't just Simi. And the way he spoke, it sounded like she belonged to this place but had escaped it. "He needed help, Baba," Simi said, her voice trembling slightly. "His daughter, she has the silent gift. Like the first mothers." The elder looked at Tiwa. His expression softened just a fraction. He stepped closer and peered at her. Tiwa stared back, unflinching. "She is why I risked returning," Simi said fiercely. "She needs the cleansing ritual. The grand rite of vibration. Only here can it be done." The elder slammed his staff onto the wooden dock, making me jump. "Silence. You demand the holiest of rites for a stranger's child after abandoning your own people? You have brought a storm upon us, woman. This man's enemies will not stop at the water's edge." He turned his back on us. "Seize them. Put them in the holding hut until the council decides their fate. The outsider's presence pollutes the sacred ground." Before I could protest, strong hands grabbed my arms. I wasn't a billionaire here. I was a prisoner. As they dragged us away into the darkness of the village, I looked back at Simi. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the elders retreating back with a mixture of defiance and terrifying sorrow. I had escaped Fola and the corrupt police of Lagos, only to land in a place with laws far older and more dangerous than any I knew. The holding hut was small, smelling of dried palm fronds and old earth. A single lantern flickered in the corner, casting long, dancing shadows against the bamboo walls. I sat on a woven mat, my back against a post, watching Tiwa sleep. Despite the humidity and the terrifying uncertainty of our situation, she had drifted off quickly, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythmic pace I envied. Simi sat across from me, her eyes fixed on the entrance. The defiance she had shown on the dock had faded, replaced by a haunting melancholy. "You're one of them, aren't you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You didn't just meet a stranger in Oshodi. This village, that whistle, it's your home." Simi sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 years. "My name is Simisola Abene. My family were the keepers of the great vibration, the healers who understood that the world is made of frequencies. My people believe that some children are born with locked spirits. The world calls them deaf or mute, but we believe they are simply vibrating at a frequency too high for the human ear." I stared at her, the billionaire skeptic in me warring with the desperate father who had seen a miracle in a Lagos market. "And you left? Why?" "Because of love," she said, a bitter smile touching her lips. "I fell in love with a man from the city who had come to the creeks to survey the land for an oil company. He promised me a world of lights and music. I stole the sacred whistle, a relic passed down through my bloodline, and ran away with him. My father, Baba Agba, cursed me. He said that by taking the sacred to the profane, I would only find silence. She looked down at her hands. And he was right. My husband left me when life got hard. My son died in a world that didn't care for his name. I thought the curse was my life. Until I saw Tiwa. You used the whistle on her, I said. You brought the sacred back into play. I had to, Simi whispered. Tiwa isn't just a child to me, Debo. She is my redemption. If I can unlock her world, maybe I can finally forgive myself for the silence I caused in my own. Before I could respond, the heavy wooden door creaked open. 2 men with staffs stood there. The council is ready. Bring the outsider and the traitor. We were led to the center of the village, where a great fire roared in a stone pit. The village elders sat in a semicircle on carved wooden stools, their faces etched with the severity of a high court. Baba Agba sat in the center, his white robes glowing orange in the firelight. Adebowale Adenuga, Baba Agba's voice boomed. You are a man who commands thousands. You build towers that scrape the sky. But tell me, can you build a bridge to your daughter's heart? I stood tall, though my legs felt like water. I have tried. I have spent millions. I have sought every doctor in the West. The West looks for what is broken, the elder countered. We look for what is hidden. Your daughter is a vessel of the ancient echo. But to unlock it, a sacrifice must be made. Not of blood, but of ego. He pointed his staff at me. Your enemies are coming. We can feel the vibration of their metal birds and their iron boats approaching our waters. They follow the signal of the devices you carry. I froze. My iPhone. Even without a signal, the GPS tracker was likely still active. Fola's father had connections. They could be tracking the last known location. If we perform the rite of vibration, the village will be exposed, Baba Agba continued. We have remained hidden for generations to protect our ways. To save your daughter, we risk our existence. Why should we do this for you? Because she is innocent. I cried out. Take my money, take my company, I will sign it all over to this village. Just let her hear. Let her speak. Baba Agba laughed, a dry, mocking sound. Again you offer paper and gold. We have no use for your empire. If you want the right, you must prove you are willing to stay in the silence with her. You must renounce your life in the city. You must remain here as a servant to the village, until the moon completes its cycle. Stay here? For a month. I looked at my ruined clothes, thought of my board meetings, my pending merger, my penthouse. Then I looked at Tiwa, who was being held by a village woman. She looked so small against the backdrop of the ancient forest. I will stay, I said, my voice firm. And what of the woman? Baba Agba looked at Simi. She stole our heritage. She must face the trial of the creek. She must swim the dark waters to the sacred island and return with the white stone. If she survives, her debt is paid. No, I shouted. That's suicide. The waters are full of crocodiles and currents. Simi stepped forward, her face calm. I accept. For Tiwa. The air suddenly turned cold. A low hum began to vibrate through the ground, not from a drum but from the earth itself. The villagers began to chant, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to make the very flames of the fire dance in a strange pattern. The rite begins at midnight, Baba Agba declared. Prepare the girl. As we were led away, a distant sound shattered the spiritual atmosphere. It was a rhythmic thud-thud-thud from the sky. Helicopters, I whispered, my heart sinking. Fola hadn't waited for the law. She had sent mercenaries. The village erupted into chaos. Men grabbed bows and spears, while women hurried children into the deeper mangroves. 2 bright searchlights pierced the canopy from above, sweeping across the village like the eyes of a vengeful god. They're here for me, I said to Simi, panic rising. They'll destroy everything to get to her. We have to get to the sacred grove, Simi urged, grabbing Tiwa. The rite must be completed now, or the connection will be lost forever. We ran. We ran through the thick undergrowth, the thorns tearing at my skin. Behind us, I heard the sound of boots on the dock and the harsh shouts of men in tactical gear. Adenuga. Give us the girl and you might live, a voice boomed through a megaphone. It was Fola's brother, a man known for his brutality. We reached a clearing where massive Irako trees formed a natural cathedral. In the center was a stone altar, surrounded by a circle of ancient bells. Baba Agba was already there, his face grim. The outsiders bring fire, the elder said. The vibration is being shattered. Please? I begged, falling to my knees. Do it now. Baba Agba handed the wooden whistle to Tiwa. He then signaled to the drummers who had followed us. They began a frantic, driving beat. Simi took her place on the other side of the altar, her hand on Tiwa's shoulder. The mercenaries burst into the clearing. 6 men, armed with assault rifles, their faces covered in black masks. "Stop!" the lead mercenary commanded, leveling his rifle at me. "Back away from the kid." I stood up, shielding Tiwa with my body. "You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged," he sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger. Suddenly, Tiwa did something incredible. She didn't hide. She stepped around me. She raised the wooden whistle to her lips. She didn't just blow into it. She blew with a force that seemed to come from her very soul. A sound emerged that I can only describe as a roar of pure light. It wasn't loud in the way a gunshot is loud. It was heavy. It was a wave of pressure that hit the mercenaries like a physical wall. They stumbled back, their hands flying to their ears. The electronic headsets they wore sparked and hissed, the interference from the whistle overloading their equipment. The bells around the clearing began to ring on their own, caught in the resonance. The ground shook. In that moment of supernatural chaos, Simi didn't run. She looked at the lead mercenary, who was screaming in pain as his earpiece melted. She saw a fallen branch and, with the strength of a mother, swung it, knocking the weapon from his hand. "Now Baba!" Simi cried. Baba Agba placed his hands over Tiwa's ears. He began to whisper words that seemed to glow in the air. "Tiwa, daughter of the lion, child of the echo. Hear the world." A crack like a lightning bolt echoed through the grove. Tiwa gasped, her eyes flying open wider than I had ever seen. She dropped the whistle. She clutched her head and began to scream. "Tiwa!" I rushed to her, catching her as she collapsed. "Is she okay? What happened?" The mercenaries were disoriented, some unconscious, others fleeing back toward the helicopters, terrified by the witchcraft they had witnessed. The clearing fell silent. The bells stopped ringing. The fire in the village had died down. Tiwa lay in my arms, her eyes closed. I felt for a pulse. It was there, steady and strong. "Tiwa? Can you hear me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't move. Did it fail? I looked at Baba Agba, my heart breaking. Did we do all this for nothing? The elder looked tired, his white robes torn. He looked at Simi, then at me. "The door is open, Adebowale. But she has to choose to walk through it." Suddenly, a twig snapped in the distance. A bird chirped in the canopy above. Tiwa's ears twitched. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked up at the trees, her head tilting to the side. She looked at the bird. Then she looked at the rustling leaves. Then she looked at me. She reached up and touched my lips. "Pa, pa." The word was small. It was shaky. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my entire life. I burst into tears, pulling her close to my chest, sobbing into her hair. "Yes, baby. Papa is here. Papa is here." But our joy was short-lived. From the shadows, Fola stepped out. She wasn't wearing her high society silks anymore. She was wearing a tactical vest and she was holding a handgun. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You ruined everything, Debo," she hissed, pointing the gun at my head. "The fortune, the reputation, my family's name. If I can't have the Adenuga Empire, nobody will." She shifted her aim from me to Tiwa. "No!" Simi screamed, throwing herself toward Fola. A shot rang out, echoing through the sacred grove. The sound of the gunshot was a thunderclap that seemed to rip the world in two. For a heartbeat, everything went into slow motion. I saw the muzzle flash, the smell of cordite biting into the humid air, and Simi's body blurring as she threw herself across the space between the gun and my daughter. "No!" I screamed, a sound of raw, guttural agony. Simi crumpled to the forest floor. Fola stood there, her hands trembling, the gun still smoking. Her eyes were wide, vacant, the eyes of a woman who had let greed and envy swallow her soul whole. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I lunged forward, not with the intent to kill, but with the desperation of a man protecting his entire universe. I wrestled the weapon from Fola's weak grip and tossed it into the thick undergrowth. She fell back, sobbing hysterically, her mask of high society perfection finally shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. I turned and fell to my knees beside Simi. "Simi? Simi, talk to me." Blood was blossoming like a dark hibiscus flower on the shoulder of her print dress. She was gasping for air, her face pale, but her eyes were still fixed on Tiwa. The girl?" Simi wheezed, her voice a mere thread of sound. "Is she safe?" I looked over my shoulder. Tiwa was standing perfectly still, her hands over her ears. She wasn't crying. She was watching us with an intensity that felt ancient. Then she did something that stopped my heart. She walked over, knelt beside Simi, and placed her small hand directly over the wound. "Safe," Tiwa whispered. The word was clear. It was certain. Baba Agba stepped out of the shadows, his face like a mask of carved mahogany. He didn't look at the chaos, he looked at the sky. The helicopters were retreating, their pilots likely spooked by the strange atmospheric interference and the sight of their ground team being decimated by nothing more than a child's whistle and the village's resolve. "The sacrifice has been made," Baba Agba said, his voice echoing through the grove. "The traitor has bled for the innocent. The debt is paid." He knelt beside Simi and applied a poultice of crushed leaves and roots to her shoulder. "You will live, Simisola. But the life you knew is gone. You are no longer a fugitive. You are a daughter of the great vibration once more." The weeks that followed were a blur of transition. I stayed in the village for the full cycle of the moon just as I had promised. I left my private jet on the tarmac in Lagos. I let my board of directors scramble in a panic as my shares fluctuated. I didn't care. I spent my days learning. I learned how to fish with a spear. I learned the names of the birds that Tiwa could now hear. I learned that a millionaire is just a man with a heavy wallet, but a father is a man with a light heart. Simi healed quickly. We spent hours talking by the water's edge. She was no longer just the single mom who had walked into my mansion looking for work. She was my teacher, my anchor, and the woman who had saved my soul. When we finally returned to Lagos, it was not as the Iron Lion and his maid. It was as a family. The justice that followed was poetic and absolute. I didn't use violence. I used the very system Fola had tried to weaponize against me. I used my fortune to hire the most incorruptible investigators in West Africa. We uncovered years of racketeering and bribery led by Fola's father, the distinguished judge. The day they were arrested was a media circus. I watched from my limousine as Fola was led out of her father's mansion in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her designer handbag. She had tried to steal a child's future. Now the law was taking her own. She didn't just lose her status, she lost her freedom. But the true miracle wasn't the justice. It was what happened in my home. I converted the west wing of my Lekki mansion into the Simisola Center for Sound and Spirit. It wasn't just a school for the deaf. It was a place where traditional African healing met modern science. We brought in specialists from all over the world, but the head of the center was Simi. One evening, as the sun was setting over the Lagos lagoon, painting the water in gold and purple, I sat on the veranda. I was no longer the cold-hearted man who measured life in profit margins. I was a man who knew the value of a second chance. Tiwa ran out onto the deck, her braids flying behind her. She was holding a book, her eyes bright with the joy of 1,000 sounds. She hopped onto my lap and leaned her head against my chest. "Papa," she said, her voice now steady and melodic. "Listen." I closed my eyes. "What do I hear, Tiwa?" "The city is singing," she whispered. I listened. I heard the distant honk of a horn, the rustle of the palm trees, the laughter of the staff in the kitchen, and the rhythmic sound of Simi's footsteps as she walked out to join us. Simi sat beside me, her hand finding mine. The scar on her shoulder was a permanent reminder of the destiny that had brought us together. "You did it, Ade," she said softly. "You built the bridge." "No," I replied, looking at her and then at our daughter. "You brought the whistle. I just finally learned how to blow it." I looked out at the horizon, at the empire I had once thought was the only thing that mattered. It looked so small compared to the warmth of the hands I was holding. My trust was restored, my healing was complete, and for the first time in my life I knew that love wins. The new beginning we had found wasn't built on a fortune or a boardroom deal. It was built on the unity of a father, a mother, and a daughter who had found their voice in the heart of the silence. As the stars began to twinkle over the vibrant, beautiful madness of Lagos, I realized that the greatest fortune isn't what you have in the bank. It's the sound of the people you love, calling your name in a world that finally makes sense. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next for Ade and Simi? Comment below.